Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and also the humor in the introduction. I will actually address some of Dow's comments about the threat of AI towards the end of my brief talk. So, and happy to have a discussion about it. I really think we're the good guys and Hollywood is giving us a bad name. But we'll talk about that more specifically. I wanted to start before I get into the body of my talk, just with a couple of personal comments. As you heard from my introduction, I came from the East Coast here, and I really came for a job. This is back in 1991 at the University of Washington in the computer science department. And that department has really been my home for more than 20 years, drawn a lot of talented people here. I don't know if you guys saw, speaking of Microsoft, last night it was announced that it's creating a new building because it's generating literally thousands of degrees for our workforce and to support a lot of these exciting visions that you heard about. And Microsoft has announced that they're donating $10 million for that new building. So I think really Microsoft hosting this deserves a round of applause. And computer science at the University of Washington really has been a magnet for people and innovation, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do also at this at the Allen Institute, and of course Paul Allen with the Brain Science Institute, which is now growing to 500 people, and the smaller AI Institute is doing the same thing, bringing super smart people to the area who help to foster innovation. But here's what I thought I would do today, and it's a little bit more of a wide-ranging talk than some of what you've heard, a little bit more abstract, but I promise I'll keep it lively. I wanted to look back 20 years, see, okay, where has AI been since 1995? That's the kind of appetizer. Talk about where we are today. And specifically talk in terms of machine vision. I'll show you some pictures. Again, for some of these things like facial recognition, right, walking through the airport, and so on, you really need to solve these vision problems, getting computers to see. And then I'll talk about exactly this issue about what's AI going to look like in 20 years, and specifically address some of these concerns about, well, is AI going to take over and keep us as slaves? All right, let's get to it. So what's happened since 1995? There's really been a huge focus on what's called big data, right? Enormous amounts of information fed into the computer. So in this big data tidal wave, as you see, I'm the guy off on the side observing and saying, so what's really happening here? And let's talk about this a little bit more specifically. I should walk around too much away from the mic. The big data is kind of an amorphous concept. I'm going to show you probably my most technical slide here and explain, so what is big data really? And it consists of three things. First of all, you have a set of categories. In this case, kitchen implements, spoons, knives, cups. Then you have a set of labeled data points. So these are examples of these categories. In this case, the examples are some triangles, some circles, right? The categories are geometric shapes. And given these two inputs, what you have is a computer algorithm, right? Some software that outputs some decisions, okay? That's it. These three things is what big data is. These three things drive a huge amount of innovation. For example, if I want to tell, there's Google and Microsoft have algorithms to discriminate whether a non-spam, the algorithm makes a decision, and all of you know about how well that works, which is not perfectly, but a lot better than, there's literally billions, if not hundreds of billions of spam messages sent out every day, and most of them do not reach you. The thing I want to emphasize is all this stuff, the algorithm, the labeling on the data, the categories, is created via manual labor, right? So don't think for a second that artificial intelligence is these super intelligent machines. It's super intelligent people, many of them trained at the University of Washington actually, definitely not all of them, working really hard to create this. So artificial intelligence today still has a huge component of of human intelligence in that, and that's important to realize. Nevertheless, over these 20 years, with a lot of hard work, there have been some major successes, because in the old days, people didn't used to fear AI, they used to laugh about AI, right? It was overhyped and so on. So one of the successes is beating the world champion in chess, Garry Kasparov. This is a program called Deep Blue. Speech recognition, again, not perfect, but it's become increasingly successful. I don't know if you've noticed, but dictating to your phone, whether you're using Google or Apple or Microsoft, has really gotten a lot better. And there's been a lot of innovation behind the scenes to drive that. As mentioned, facial recognition is getting better and better. And again, some people are justifiably concerned about that. There's implications to privacy and so on, but technologically it's a huge success. Machine translation has gotten a lot better. We really can start to do adequate translation in Skype, in Google Translate. When I travel these days, I always download an app to my phone, and I find that the main things that I need to communicate with the hotels and restaurateurs in any country these days, I can get across, even though they don't speak a word of English. And of course, a few years ago, there was Watson, IBM Watson beat Seattle boy Ken Jennings. And so machines are now the world champions in jeopardy. And we do have some robots, some of them actually quite scary looking, who can do more and more. How many people saw the recent rescue challenge the DARPA had? Very few of you. So there was a challenge to deploy. It was inspired by the Japanese nuclear reactor disaster, and so they wanted robots to go in there because there's radioactivity, right? You can't send people in there and do what needs to be done, whether it's save people or shut something down or clear debris, etc. So there's all kinds of situations in that case, in a coal mine, on Mars, where you really have to rely on robots, and the environments are unpredictable. And so the robots need a degree of autonomy and flexibility, and they sent the robots in there, and the robots showed progress and but also limited success. I read one of the commentators said that in the past, seeing robots in these uncertain environments was kind of like watching grass grow, and now it was more like watching a golf game. Okay, so I mean, there is some action, but it's slow. I'm not a huge fan of watching golf. The point being, it's not Terminator, and nowhere near that. Okay, so that's where we are. And moving to today, it really has been a wide-ranging commercial impact. Pretty much every industry, whether it's e-discovery in law, whether it's in the travel industry, shopping, the recommendations you see in the shopping system are all using AI technology. It is a real thing, and it's generating billions of dollars of value for people. Let me get a little bit more detailed. Everything I've said so far is pretty abstract, and show you a case study in machine vision. They'll both show you what we can do and what some of the key limitations are. And these are slides I borrowed from my colleague, Professor Fei-Fei Li at Stanford. So, right, in 1995, even the smartest machines were blind. And you might ask, why is that, right? If we see a picture like this is Fei-Fei's really cute son. We grasp it intuitively and immediately, right, using our advanced visual cortex. So why is machine vision even a problem? What's the problem here? And the thing you have to remember that the input to the computer does not look like this at all. This is what it looks like, right? So the computer is getting from a camera a bunch of what's called pixel intensities, basically how much light is in each dot, and that light is measured on some scale. So the computer sees a bunch of numbers, and what it has to do is recover the child. It's got to recognize that this is Leo. To do the kind of things we do, it's also got to recognize Leo's attitude, right? He's happy, he's ecstatic, he's standing on the chair. That might be important, right? Particularly if you're a caretaker robot and you don't want him to fall. There's a cake here. It's a lot more complicated than just seeing Leo, right? There's relationships between objects, there's attitudes, there's a lot of complicated things going on. Where we are today is we can recognize Leo pretty well, facial recognition. We have a very hard time, for example, determining, oh, he's precariously perched on a chair, which is pretty important. So the machine vision capability is way less advanced than people. Very quickly, how it works. First of all, a huge amount, turns out, has to do with cats. And you may know this, right? It seems that machine vision researchers, and maybe the whole internet, is obsessed with cats. And cats are a hard problem. Look at that, again, you can tell it's a cat. How's the computer supposed to, given the rather remarkable orientation of the cat? So let's see, person to advance, here we go. Yeah, more cats. So billions of research dollars are going into recognizing cats. We're making progress. So that's tongue in cheek. So a big data set that's driving the research these days is something called ImageNet, developed at Stanford, and it's got 15 million images in 22,000 categories. Actually, most of these are objects, so recognizing actions, recognizing attitudes is not in here. And they do a pretty good job, right? Lots of data. They build these networks now. They have 24 million nodes, 140 million parameters, 15 billion connections. By the way, those may seem like large numbers. That pales in comparison to the 100 billion connections that are in your brain. And these nodes are nothing compared to neuron in your brain. So another thing that I take away from more than 20 years in artificial intelligence is a huge amount of humility compared to people. We are still far and away the most sophisticated computing machinery on the planet. Okay, so we can get cats. We can go further. This is an example of computer successes. We can get a person here, we can get a dog, we can get a kite. Again, objects, not necessarily understanding what's going on with the objects. We can start to identify specific objects, right? This is a 2005 Nissan Sentra. We also make a whole lot of mistakes, right? So we'll think that this is an animal, even though it's a weird superposition of a duck and an alligator. Even more remarkably, I don't know if you can see, but these noisy things here, right? It says armadillo, centipede, robin, cheetah. So these technologies are not robust. These are from an academic paper meant to show the limitations. It gave those things by analyzing the algorithm, and you can easily trick the machine to thinking that a bunch of this noise is a cheetah, or this thing with the black stripes is a king penguin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just a reminder that this technology still has a long way to go. I'll skip this example in the interest of time. At the same time, there's a lot of work here in Seattle on making the technology better, making it more automated. There's a whole bunch of startups. So when you think of something like the University of Washington Computer Science or the landscape in Seattle, it's not just these amazing companies like Microsoft and Amazon that are headquartered here. There are more than 53 large engineering centers from companies, particularly from California, right? So Google has more than 1,000 people here, Uber's here, Twitter's here, Facebook is here, eBay's here. Actually, eBay's in Redmond, they've got several hundred people. It's really remarkable, right? The draw here, and part of this whole ecosystem is a huge number of high-tech startups. I've lost count, and these are just a few of my favorite that deal with big data and have very remarkable innovations. For example, this company, Algorithmia, is creating the future of cloud computing by saying you don't just have to buy an Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure, you buy memory and you buy computational power on the cloud. They say, we're going to sell you algorithms. We're going to sell algorithms that put together. Basically, in the future, programming is going to be a lot more automated, because instead of buying the basic building blocks, you're going to buy pieces you can put together like a puzzle and do your computer program. Okay, very, very different model of computing. And this is happening right now. You can go to Algorithmia's marketplace and find literally tens of thousands of algorithms for sale. It's pretty exciting. So the point that I want to make, though, is, again, you see I keep alternating between, hey, it's really exciting, and hey, we're not there yet. And the reason I keep alternating between those two themes is they're both true. There's a lot of exciting innovation going around big data, making big data more automated. At the same time, the bottom line on my slide, big data is a far cry from actual intelligence, okay? We can do the small things, but when you try to put them together and have the abilities of a human, we're safe. So those of you who are afraid, by Dow Constantine's remark about losing your jobs, AI is not what's going to make you lose your jobs. there will be shifts in the labor force, but they take a lot longer. So this is my favorite summary of this. Is called the AI car wash, right? This is the kind of thing you'd expect from a robot, right? The lack of common sense washing your car in the rain. Okay. So given all these remarks and this kind of tension between progress and the technological challenges, what are we going to see in the next 20 years? Here's my personal predictions called from, there's a lot of predictions out there. These are the ones that I believe in. I do believe that in the coming years, maybe even 5 to 10 years, autonomous cars will be safer than human drivers. And again, I have a 16-year-old who's just started to drive. And I get texts from him, supposedly he's pulled over, but, I'm not that dumb, son. And I just find the whole thing terrifying. Him driving, the whole texting and driving thing, I think we're going to be a lot safer with autonomous cars, frankly. Also, automatic analysis of images and video, that is coming down the road. Siri, right, these days has a lot of personality, but it's pretty limited if you actually try to get it to do things. And the same is true for Cortana and Google Now. That's changing in a big way over the next 20 years. We will have these intelligent assistants we can interact with and do highly non-trivial things. Search on the web is going to get better, and that's good because the web keeps getting just bigger and bigger and bigger, right? We need help finding what we're looking for, finding it fast, and finding it from a mobile phone, right? Because these days we don't have the patience to sit there and go through 10 blue links on what's ultimately a pretty small screen. And the same is true for all these industries. Again, I don't have time to go through it, but one by one, these things are changing. Robotic surgery, my brother is a surgeon, and when I talk to him about robotic surgery, he says, I've been doing that for years. Not the whole surgery, not the decisions, but certain actions, in that it's called robot-assisted surgery. Certain actions are just, you're better off having the robot do it than, my brother's hands are very steady. But you know what I'm saying. Some things, it's just better done by a machine these days. Now, we also think a lot, this is at the Allen Institute, about how machines can acquire knowledge from text. Often that's a very important thing. Let me just pause here and give a quick example. One of the things that happens when I go see a doctor, I know that he or she does not know the latest information about my condition. They're completely overwhelmed. I got to see a person every 10 minutes. There's millions, literally, of academic papers being published every year. They cannot keep up anymore. And so computers reading all these dry academic papers, pulling out the key facts and making them available to doctors at the right time are really going to help those doctors keep up and ultimately treat us better. So a lot of the work we're doing at the Allen Institute is building those abilities of the computer to do elementary reading so that we can expose information to all kinds of professionals. Okay, so let me take you now in the, just a few more minutes. I want to now again talk about the future and the implications of this technology. I was recently at TED, which these days is in Vancouver, and there was a gentleman from Oxford named Nick Bostrom. He wrote a book called Superintelligence, where he talks about the paths and the dangers of AI. As you can tell, I think AI is a great thing. So people said, okay, what we really need is these two guys to debate. This picture is photoshopped. Yeah, but it was a fun idea. So they gave me 3 minutes to respond to his worries about how AI is going to destroy us. And so I'll share this with you. And really what's happening is both Hollywood and very smart people like Stephen Hawking and Nick Bostrom and even Bill Gates have sounded the alarm about artificial intelligence. And Elon Musk has said that AI is like summoning the demon. Okay, I mean, pretty emotionally loaded language that I do take exception to. So at the Allen Institute, our focus really, and this is very much in the direction of Paul Allen, who's very engaged in this, not just giving us money, but talking frequently and emailing frequently about the technical direction. We're focusing on AI for the common good. So we're asking the question, how can AI technology help us, as opposed to all these negative things you see in the movie? So I'll talk more about that in a second, but to really understand what's going on, I'd like to start by making a key distinction that's often confused by people, and that's the distinction between intelligence and autonomy. People, of course, have both. We're intelligent, we have free will, so we tend to associate the two. But the truth is that intelligence and autonomy are two very different things. And to illustrate this, I have this 2x2 table. And I want to show you that we can have high autonomy with minimal intelligence. And that's a bunch of teenagers, drinking on a Saturday night, right? That's the quintessential example. We can also have high intelligence with low autonomy. And that's the program, the Watson program. It won Jeopardy. It didn't even know it won. Right? It's just there. And then after it wins, it just sits there. It can't even play another game of Jeopardy until somebody pushes a button, right? And if you ask it to play checkers, it can't. It's very, very limited. And that's true of a lot of our programs. They're really kind of savants. They're very, very good, but it's very, very narrow things. So these things are very different. And what you want to think about is that autonomous programs are really something that we do need to think about, okay? The notion of software running around freely in the world is a pretty scary thing. We already have scary software that does this. Viruses, cyber weapons, those are things that are out there that can do enormous amount of damage, malware, but they're not particularly intelligent, okay? It's a separate thing, and I do think all of us should be thinking and discussing vigorously autonomous software. But AI is this very different thing, is we're building these tools that are going to make things better for society. And when we think about these tools, we really need to separate science from science fiction. This is right, the HAL computer that tried to kill people. That's really not what's going on. Your calculator, okay, is a useful tool. It's not scheming how to take over. Even if we have these cars, right, they're called self-driving cars, they're called autonomous cars. The truth is, they're autonomous the way that your automatic transmission is autonomous. It can choose which gear to have. The car will, 5-10 years, it'll drive you to your destination, but it will not choose the destination, and it will not try to take over. It's not like all the automated Uber taxis are going to gang up and attack New York. Okay, that only happens in the movies. So my prediction to you, again, without going into all the technical detail, is that an asteroid striking the Earth and annihilating life as we know it is much more likely than AI turning evil in the foreseeable future, in the next 25 years. So that's important to keep in mind. Andrew Ng, a colleague of mine from Stanford, the way he put it is, working today to prevent AI from turning evil is like disrupting the space program to prevent overpopulation on Mars. It just, it ignores the technical challenges. There's just better ways to spend our time and our focus. There are real risks that we ought to be thinking about, whether it's climate change or traffic and so on. And the other thing that a lot of these discussions ignore is the benefits, right? So yeah, we have worries about computers. We want to think about technology, but imagine a world without these things. Where would we be? Imagine a world without fire. And as I mentioned, a major project of ours is to deal with information explosion, right? To build this semantic search engines that help scientists and help doctors find what they're looking for. And Eric Horvitz, who's a very famous researcher, he's one of the leaders of Microsoft Researchers, said it's the absence of AI technology that's already killing people through errors that could be prevented, through medical errors, through driving errors. All these things could be prevented with more intelligent technology. So the fear is misplaced, right? People are already dying because we haven't done our job quickly enough building AI in the context of my son. Again, intelligent cars will literally save lives. 34,000 deaths on the American roads every year, and we can get away from that. So my bottom line is simple. AI will not exterminate us. It's a tool, and a tool that's going to empower us. And the last point I want to make, because I know I'm talking to business leaders here, is it's not just that it's going to be AI for the social good. Frankly, there's a lot of money to be made in this, both in the ways it was described in the applications and new startups and companies that carry AI forward. So thank you very much. It sounds like I have time for one or two questions if anybody has. Or if not, I can go back to the research, to trying to save your life. Yes? Yeah, so there's a set of predictions that I didn't allude to. So the singularity refers to this point where computers overtake us, right? There's actually different singularities, but in this context, the computers become smarter than us. And my short answer to that question, because I need to be brief, is I can't see it even in my wildest dreams. Not that it won't happen in 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years or even 200 years. Nobody, and don't let anybody tell you that, nobody can predict what's going to happen in 100 years. The future's, but in anything that I see, there ain't no singularity. It's just a bunch of people, talking big. Yes?
So I think in the second machine age, we talked about AI eliminating jobs, like large-scale elimination jobs.
Repeat the question.
I will.
So I would wonder how you would address that, and since we're in college, how we could teach the new generation, especially people who are not able to get into the institutions like the University of Washington.
Right. So a few points. First of all, to repeat the question, okay, what about AI and jobs, and specifically AI eliminating jobs, which is a much more near-term concern. So the first thing I want to say is that the impact of technology, and specifically of AI on jobs, is a very real concern. So by no means am I, the singularity, as you could tell, not worried about it. I think we ought to think about what's happening with jobs. There's a long history, starting with agriculture, where most of us used to work in agriculture, displacing jobs, and then automation. And there's no question, and we already see this, that technology has changed, displaced a bunch of people. And actually a great example, think about Expedia, right? A local company. Think about Redfin and Zillow. Those are companies that disrupt industries, and disruption is a polite word for some people are going to lose their jobs. But what's also happened is, and this is a statistic not everybody's aware of, the labor force has grown over these years while these technologies have come to play, and has grown faster than the population in a substantial way. So that means that they're also creating jobs. And of course, then the challenge becomes, how do we manage that as a society? How do we manage that in terms of education and training? How do we manage that in terms of creating safety net for people? So there's a lot of policy questions. So my answer to that is, I'm a technologist, and I strongly encourage us to engage in those policy questions and to figure things out. Now, specifically, you asked about education. I would say, number one, University of Washington, computer science is an elite institution, but this drive, right, why did Microsoft give $10 million more, is to expand it. So we have room for more computer science majors at the University of Washington. We can train more and more people in the workforce. At the same time, of course, other people need to be trained. Dow Constantine was talking about early investment. It's so essential for everybody to become computer literate. And it may be too late for some of you. If you have, I guess it shows that I am, a geek. But if you have a 5-year-old kid, okay, there are games, there are things to prepare them to code. If you have a 9-year-old child, boy or girl, and they don't know how to program, that's really a literacy problem for them. That really needs to change in the schools, it needs to change at home, and I think that literacy is going to help. And then I think, the other obvious things, better education about technology, science and other things is going to help as well. So thank you for that question. It's a great question and one that we all need to be thinking about. Okay.